Glory be to thee, O Lord my God. I implore thee by thy name, through which thou didst lift up the ensigns of thy guidance, and didst shed the radiance of thy loving kindness, and didst reveal the sovereignty of thy lordship, through which the lamp of thy names hath appeared within the niche of thine attributes, and he who is the tabernacle of thy unity and the manifestation of detachment hath shone forth, through which the ways of thy guidance were made known, and the paths of thy good pleasure were marked out, through which the foundations of error have been made to tremble, and the signs of wickedness have been abolished, through which the fountains of wisdom have burst forth, and the heavenly table hath been sent down, through which thou didst preserve thy servants, and didst vouchsafe thy healing, through which thou didst show forth thy tender mercies unto thy servants, and revealedst thy forgiveness amidst thy creatures. I implore thee to keep safe him who hath held fast and returned unto thee, and clung to thy mercy, and seized the hem of thy loving providence. Send down then upon him thy healing, and make him whole, and endue him with a constancy vouchsafed by thee, and a tranquility bestowed by thy highness. Thou art verily the healer, the preserver, the helper, the almighty, the powerful, the all-glorious, the all-knowing. Baha'u'llah.
Test you through an obstacle course.
What's the difference? You just saw us the whole time. What a place. How do you do it?
Well, dear friends, we have a lot of work to do. Okay? So, we're sticking with the title, the idea of love and knowledge and mysticism, however construed, and it seems to be construed in a number of ways. But the basic guiding principle is that in order to be a Baha'i, you must be a mystic. It's not possible otherwise. And because we have mysteries, because we honor realities that are ineffable and unseeable, and this is at the heart of what the idea of mysticism means. And these things are not just marginal notions, these are at the very center of who Baha'is are. There is a social program, of course, and that's beautiful and wonderful and inspiring in its own way. But the mystic constitution, if you like, says that you must see such things as deriving from the spirit and not, as great teacher has told us, not the spirit deriving from those things, right? And this is non-negotiable, as I understand And this is even though it is not irrational, supra-rational, rather than being discouraging and a cause of perplexity and doubt, somehow through the alchemy of the words and the ideas and the spirit that flows through the writings, it becomes a source of certitude. I'm not sure I could explain that directly in the time remaining to us today, but it is a bankable truth, frankly. So this is where we're carrying on. One of the words for the mystic pursuit in Islamic culture is suluk, right? It means journeying. Sayr wa suluk, traveling and wandering or directing your steps. A salik is the mystic wanderer or the mystic seeker, better. That word appears a lot in the seven valleys and I think the four valleys too, but a lot in the seven. The salik, the journeyer, the traveler first goes to the valley of search, and then the valley of then the traveler, the salik. The oldest datable revelation we have from the Bab, before he had his glass of tea with Mullah Hussein on the 23rd of May in 1844. And it's the oldest because, remember the commentary I was talking about when we ended last time was written just as the Bab had received through mystical channels, through a vision that he experienced very powerfully. If we go by the language that he himself has described it in, Sayyid Kazem had just died. This must have been around the end of December or the beginning of January 1843, 1844. So that the Bab got news of this, and in the grammar of the text, it may even be that he got news of this before it actually happened. So, but it happened around, and that's when he began that work, the commentary on the Surah of the Cow, which is, I studied in the book entitled Quran Commentary as Mystical Experience, and which we talked a little bit about. To remember, the important thing to remember from this point of view about that book is that the center of it, the center and circumference of it, is this idea of what's called, translated in our writings as guardianship, but which is in Arabic, and that work is in Arabic, it's all in Arabic, is walaya, which is guardianship, loyalty, love, devotion, acceptance, and all kinds of other ideas. The person who gives away the bride to be at a wedding is called a wali. He has guardianship, but he has also protects her and loves her and so on. It's usually a brother or that's just one tiny example. But that work was started at the death of Sayyid Kazem, and I think, as I said, that the Bab was demonstrating his desire to write a complete Quran commentary on all 114 chapters, and those there are dozens of those complete commentaries in the Library of Quranic Sciences, and there are 30 volumes each one of them. They're massively long, and they are. I mean, they're really a testament to the devotion and love of the people who write it and the people who study them, and it is kind of in fact a way of getting close to the Holy Spirit by thinking about the sacred writing and writing it. It's a mode of ecstasy eventually, but a mode of devotion and worship. This work that the Bab calls the Risalat al-Suluk, the epistle about the mystic journey, which is what the Seven Valleys is, a mystical journey, was written while Sayyid Kazim was still alive. And we know that by the way the Bab refers to him in the text. Whereas in the other work, he asks for, he says the usual thing you say when you mention a person who has passed away, when you mention their name, you say, Rahimahullah, may God be merciful to them or forgive them, etc. Here, when the person is a respected person, you said the formula is different. And something like, please extend his long life and make him, allow him to prosper, this kind of thing. That's when the Bab mentions Sayyid Kazim in this text, Sayyid Kazim is still alive. And so this is what the Bab's oldest datable, as far as we know. I don't know, Stephen, maybe you have an older one. This is what we're going by, that this is, there may be older ones, but they don't have any indication of when, unlike this one, which has a date stamp, if you like. So here, this is translated a long time ago and probably needs all kinds of tweaking. But I'll read a few lines from it to give you an idea of kind of what it feels like. In the name of God, the merciful, the compassionate, be steadfast, O seeker of piety, in the station of affirming the divine unity. As God exalted has said, and then he quotes the Quran, as for those who say, our Lord is God, then continue steadfast, the angels descend upon them, saying, fear not, nor be grieved, receive good news of the garden which you were promised. Then the Bab says, know ye that the paths to God are as numerous as the breaths of the creatures. This is also an improvisation on an older hadith. It says the paths to God are as numerous as the creatures. And the Bab interjects what we would call a pun in English, but that gives a kind of diminished station to the language thing that's happening here. The technical term is paronomasia. And in some cultures, there's nothing frivolous about it. It is a demonstration of the interconnectedness of the language and that it's all under the wing of a much higher intelligence. So when the Bab changes the word nufus to anfas, looks to the outsider like he's just playing around with the language. But no, it's got the most serious possible indication there. So that he says the paths to God are as numerous as the breaths of the merciful. Not just as numerous as the people, right? You see, we have this unity and diversity sacrament from the very birth, in the pre-existence of the Baha'i faith in these texts, right? So there's no bartering away this devotion to the multiplicity of creation and the fact that multiplicity is sacred. Then he brings us, he sort of brings two different directions. Know ye that the paths to God are as numerous as the breaths of the creatures? Yet there is no soul but one, and there is no religion but the one religion. And it is the cause of God. And our command, quoting the Quran, is but as a single act. Right? Similar to the passage quoted by Baha'u'llah in the seven ballets, knowledge was one, and the ignorant have multiplied it. Knowledge was a single point, right? Yeah. So set thou thy face steadily to the true faith, the nature, fitra, made by God, in which he has made humanity. There is no altering God's creation. The Bab was, we don't know how young he was when he wrote this. Verily, religion, deen, is the word that's usually translated as religion. Deen has a different semiotic profile than the word religion, and maybe we can talk about that a little more. It's important to know, I think, for us. So Deen is supported by 4 pillars. And here, see the number 4? Super important amongst the Sheikhis and the Bab and Baha'u'llah, right? The number 4 has a special status in our tradition. A tradition which has no tradition. So they are affirming divine unity, that is Tawheed. Number 2, prophethood, which is Nubuwwah. Guardianship, which is Walaya. And 4th, the community. And listen very carefully what he says next. These are 4 gates, of which none, or of which not one, is of any use without the other 3. God, prophethood, guardianship, and us chickens. The community, the people, right? Just the common or garden humanoid. Is it just as important in the aggregate, according to this statement, as the oneness of God, the idea of Nubuwwah, and the idea of Walaya? This is pretty powerful. And this is also part of this treatise on the mystic path. Hello. Okay. Perhaps someone is disagreeing with what I'm saying.
Todd, didn't you do a provisional translation of this?
That's what I'm reading from. Yeah.
Spiritual journey.
That's right.
I
Yeah.
got it in an email.
Okay.
That fixed it?
Is that working?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Just we needed
The community.
The community. That's right. The community also entails static from time to time. Is that the idea? Yeah. All right. And all of this, these 4 pillars, arkan, like the 5 pillars of Islam, except the Sheikhis were famous for reducing the number 5 to 4. And so the Bab is talking about this. It got them into a little hot water here and there, but it's all right. And all of this, he says, is the face of God, which will never perish. This is a Quranic verse. The face of God never perishes. And this is the love of the family of God. This is what he calls the prophet. The prophet's daughter Fatima, and Ali, and the rest of the imams. He refers to them, and especially in this early period, and frequently later on, as the family of God.
14 pure ones.
The 14 pure ones, that's right. Which is the same, okay. And this is the love of the family of God. That is to say, the face of God is the love of the family of God. That's where you see God, in the family of God. And this is the love of the family of God, which is the same as the love of God, he says. This is the hidden treasure. And you all familiar with the hidden treasure, perhaps? Well, you will become a little more familiar with it in a couple of minutes. We'll talk about the hidden treasure. Is a super important sacred saying from the Islamic tradition that has been an object of contemplation for every generation of Muslim philosopher and mystic since it was recorded. And it was also the object and subject of a very impressive commentary by a young fellow named Abbas Effendi at about the age of 16. Baha'u'llah asked him to write a commentary on this hadith, the hidden treasure, to give to a local Muslim official, Ali Shaukat Pasha in Iraq. And it's available online at the Baha'i great library, the one that comes out of Wilmette that Jonah Winters organizes and so on. And there's a beautiful translation by Momin, and it should be required reading, this thing. It's just unbelievable. But it's easy to get. I know you're all going to go on the coffee break, download it and study it real hard for the next session. But if you don't have the time to do that today, try to do it very soon, because it's an unsung, super luminous document and source of deepening for the Baha'i community. It's magnificent.
Commentary on
The Hadith of the Hidden Treasure, translated by Mujan. I think you can find it under his name at the Baha'i Library
And
online.
the author was a Muslim scholar?
The author was, well, he was at the time. It was Abbas Effendi Abdul Baha. Abdul Baha, yeah.
Age 16.
16, 17. Yeah, it's utterly mind-blowing. It really is. Okay, so where were we? All right, these 4 gates are the face of God, and the face of God is also the Holy Family, Muhammad and the Imams, and Fatima. Fatima has an enormously important place in Shi'i thought and religion. One of her nicknames is Tahireh. It's no accident that Tahireh was called Tahireh, because people think of Tahireh as the daughter of Muhammad. And the Bab says in the Persian Bayan, of course, in the first opening of it, all the letters of the living were the return of the 14 holy ones, Muhammad and the Imams. So Tahireh is included there. Fatima was also her name, Fatima, and so, but in any case, Fatima is known in the tradition, especially in the higher floors of the mystical library of Islam. She's called the mother of her father. She's called the creator of all existence. She's a perfect Gnostic figure in Shi'i Islam. And it's transmitted in the Baha'i writings. Fatima still has a very exalted position in the Baha'i faith. So there needs to be some more work done, see? Okay, so then we'll skip the rest of that. So in Arabic, what the uninitiated would refer to as punning, and what the serious people would call by another word, by deepening, perhaps. The words are built on usually 3-letter roots, like, for example, kitab, K, T, and B. And the different meanings and uses of the central idea of kitab, which is writing, are brought out and articulated by putting different kinds of vowels between the consonants. The consonants are the real letters. Vowels are not considered letters in the way that consonants are. Right? It's a different story. But or prefixes, or infixes, or suffixes. So you have words like maktub and iktisab and kitab and kutub and katib and so on. So there's a lot of room for this paranomasia that any Muslim scholar who is worth anything engages in, because it's highly appreciated. The Arabs and the Persians love to thrill to the way in which the language generates meaning in this wondrous way. And we're going to return to wonder as well today at some point. Don't let me forget. All right, so the word that he's going to talk about next is the word for love, hub, H-B-B. And hub, habib, mahbub, and mahabbat are the words. He says that love, beloved, lover, and source of beloved, if you like, are 4 divine signs appearing from the radiant self-manifestation of the family of God in you. That these signs are in you, each one of us, and in your soul. And in a variant it says, and are your soul.
And beloved with a capital B.
That's right. All of them, yeah. Well, we need to tweak some of this translation. Whenever these four signs are remembered within you, and your heart is illumined, and your soul stirred, and your spirit moved, your body quakes with longing, then you are truly among the people of paradise and the companions of the commander of the faithful, that is Ali, upon him be peace. So this is the oldest writing from the Baha'i, and it is completely absorbed with this mystical path and this journey through love and knowledge. Right? It goes on for a couple of more pages, but I won't. This is easily downloadable as well.
Yeah, I got it pulled up right here.
Okay. All righty. So what we want to do now, because the talk clicks, we would like to carry on and go to the Qayyum al-Asma, all right, and try and talk about how that is such a remarkable event, shall we say, literary event, but it's more than mere literature, obviously, and what's up with it, kind of thing. Mm-hmm. All of this is in the service of trying to drive home to myself and to all of us here how important engagement with the unknowable and the unseen is to the life of the mind and the heart. All right, so we know I'm going to take a couple of seconds and describe to you this text, the Qayyum al-Asma. It is also remarkable as a work, it's a work of a creative artist who is trapped inside of a theologian's body. Kind of thing. The Bab was, in his culture and time and place, there was not a word like art and artist that was applied in that milieu. There were painters and calligraphers, and there were potters, and there were mosaicists. But the idea of art, as we know it today, I think really got off the ground in the 19th century, frankly. And with the theorizing of a number of people. But if those people who had theorized what we understand as art in the West had been familiar with the Bab's life and work, he would have been a prime example of an artist. And his message would have been contrary to the way. For us, the message has emerged as the most important thing. But for art's sake group, it is the art that is the message, right? The medium that is the message. Well, I believe that the Bab actually did believe that the medium was the message, and that the artistic gesture was an act of revelation. And I think that this is demonstrated and embodied in this text, the Qayyum al-Asma. And this has to do with the subject of the Qayyum al-Asma, which is Joseph, who was, according to the mystical tradition of Islam, the manifestation of divine imagination, and who is associated with that which is beautiful and meaningful, and more directly related to the artistic life and thought and concept and soul, is the master of interpretation. So we have with Joseph beauty, interpretation, imagination, and of course, a sufficient amount of suffering. And suffering is also a mode of acquiring love and knowledge, as we will visit here if we have time. So this commentary, which the Bab composed over a period of time, it's controversial how long he actually took to write it. He wrote the first chapter on the night of the meeting with Mullah Hussein, but it's modeled on the Surah of Joseph in the Quran, which is distinctive from the get-go. It is the only surah in the Quran that has a beginning, a middle, and an end. It is considered the most beautiful of all the surahs. And in the Islamic tradition, it's considered the most beautiful of all the stories. It is considered beautiful because it is beautifully wrought. The Arabic, of course, it's revelation, and it's ravishing, but it's about the most beautiful being that ever drew a breath. Kazim Rashdi has a hadith which says that God created beauty in 100 parts and gave to Joseph 99. Right? So that's who Joseph is. And Joseph is also in the grip of beauty. And he's beautiful, the story is beautiful, and it's about the joys and dangers of beauty. So it's a killer story. It's absolutely magnificent. You know, it's just tremendous. And so this is what the Bab, the manifestation of God, the return of the hidden Imam, the primal point, chose to inaugurate. And I think that the choice of inaugurating the new dispensation and the new cycle was also a conscious decision to say, this is how the new cycle will be characterized. Concerns with beauty, with interpretation, with imagination, with love, and there's a very deep gospel of the landscape of the emotional life in the story of Joseph. So these emotions are brought out in relief very clearly. Betrayal, faithlessness, love between Joseph and Jacob, love between Joseph and Zuleika, love of Joseph for his dastardly brothers, who he forgave after just a little bit of fun with them. He forgave them. He could have turned them into hamburger, you know, if he wanted. He was the most powerful person in Egypt. He didn't have to forgive anybody, but he forgave them. So the Bab chose this story for the new cycle, right? There's got to be something there to think about. And then the way that he did it is completely unprecedented in the history of Quranic commentary. He calls it the tafsir of the Surah Yusuf, and he arranges it in a way that is unprecedented. 114 chapters. Each chapter is 42 verses long, depending how you count it. Sometimes maybe 40. Either way, it doesn't matter. There's meaning in both. I choose 42. Most people say 42. It begins with the verse, then with a long disquisition using that verse as a basis, in the course of which the Bab also marshals, over the course of the 114 chapters, the rest of the Quran. So it actually ends up being a commentary on the entire Quran under the cloak or guise of Joseph, the multicolored cloak. of Joseph. So it just takes your breath away. The conception of it is miraculous. No one but an artist could come up with this, right? And in the process of doing this, he demonstrates to friend and foe alike that he has actually embodied the entire Quran and he has utter control over it. He goes from one end of the text to the other in a heartbeat. It turns, it's as if he's revealing it backwards sometimes. It's upside down, but it's all there. In a sense, he's not making anything up, although much of it is the result of his imagination. It is there. It demonstrates that he has complete mastery over the Quran text. That he wrote it like turning on a water tap. And the way he plays with, and 19% of the words are from the Quran, but it's like the analogy with Charlie Parker or John Coltrane. You know, if they're playing My Favorite Things, for example. Yes, we can hear it in there, but it's a new creation. It's something new. And it's not so easy right off the bat. You have to work at it, and you have to mine the beauty, but that's what it's all about. If there ain't no audience, there ain't no show, correct? So remember the idea of Mullah Hussein being the one without whom God would not have been established on his throne? That we're, for the time being, understanding it. If the message isn't heard, it isn't given. If the music isn't heard, it isn't played, right? So this is again where the community is as important as God in the Bab's four-part scheme: Tawheed, Nabuwa, Walaya, and the community, the believers. They all have to be there together, and the four make a kind of a perfect, sort of symmetrical, tangible reality. Please.
Do we know why Mullah Hussein specifically was looking for a commentary on this exact?
Yeah, it's in the writings.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because that's,
Yeah, I can return to that.
okay, great.
Yeah. So what happens in the course of this text, and it is actually also a text, a readable text. It's not just all these artistic fireworks, but there are increments of meaning that are obviously there, very deep and very beautiful and ravishing. But what happens here, and this is relatively new, both with regard to what the Sheikhis were doing, Sayyid Kazem and Sheikh Ahmad, what the Bab had done in earlier works, like the tafsir on the cow, and this risala, this essay on suluk, or this treatise on mystic quest. He introduces a couple of key words that are repeated almost with hypnotic frequency, as a kind of a drone in the background. Because remember, the Arabic is very beautiful musically, right? So it is a kind of a multimedia event when he's revealing that first chapter to Mullah Hussein. And you read Nabil, it's quite clear. The pen is making this shrill voice, right? And that's real, by the way. Those pens that they use, the really great calligraphers could play them almost like a musical instrument, scratching their sort of bamboo-y sound on the paper, on the parchment. And so that was part of the performance. Then his gorgeous handwriting, which you've all seen examples of, you see, beautifully developed and cultivated. And he sang it as he revealed it in his Shirazi voice. And this is going on, and Mullah Hussein is sitting over here, sort of just. Well, he says he was blown away. He was absolutely blown away. well, we don't have a lot of time, so I better keep at it. But and the sort of drone-ish kind of leitmotif, or something that keeps repeating itself in the music of all of this meaning and light and love, are two ideas that are very important in the Baha'i phase and in the Baha'i phase. One is the word haq, H-A-Q-Q. He repeats it 1,000 times over and over again. It becomes a kind of a verse ending mannerism in many different ways. Al-haq bil-haq, al-haqiq, al-haq, al-law, al-haq al-kitab, al-haq al-this, over and over again, repeated, and a dozen times in each chapter, as sometimes in the middle of a verse, frequently to end a verse, to give an idea at the end. And then the other idea is the idea of the wondrously new, which is the way one translates this word Badi', B-A-D-I-Ain, Badi', yeah. And the Bab here uses both of those terms to speak about the ancient permanence of haq, which means absolute. It's the highest word for God in the Quran. Haq. It is a symbol of the God in his absolute or her absolute reality. Haq, which none of us can really know, but that's the word for it, and that's the word that points us in the direction of it to a goal that we will never reach. But as Sheikh Ahmad says, you mustn't keep trying. You mustn't stop trying. You must keep pointed at it. We'll never know it, but this is part of the process, right? So that is permanent, fixed, and in a sense, utterly unknowable, but at the same time, to know that it's unknowable is a knowledge, right? To know that it's unknowable is a knowledge, and a very important one.
Is haq associated with Baha'u'llah?
Not directly, not linguistically, but he uses the word a lot in the writings, because it means God. The other word, wondrously new, is sprinkled through the text of the Qayyam al-Asma from beginning to end with similar regularity and frequency, and almost like a mannerism, and it means the wondrously new, and it comes from the Quran, and it comes from a verse that is very familiar to all the Baha'is. It comes from the verse where this idea of the B and the E are joined and knit together. Right? That word is, in Arabic, is kun. Kun means be thou. And that word is introduced when Muhammad is in the Quran is saying that God oh, maybe it was static electricity.
It's all part of God being unknowable.
I don't want to lose my thought. So, okay, thank you. So it comes from a verse where it says, using the divine name Badi. Whenever the Badi wants something to exist, he simply says to it, be, and it is. In other words, creates something out of nothing. And this shows the power of God. And this, the verb and the verbal form, and the participle, and the agent are all built around this word B-D-Ein. It's a word, it's a letter, unfortunately, that we have a lot of trouble with in English, and it impedes this kind of consultation. It discourages people. Yeah, I have to say, it's a bit like saying loch in Scott, Loch Lomond. You can, kind of swallow the glottal stop, you get ein. It's the word, it's ein, as in Abdul Baha, right? Ain. So, or Ain, yeah. So, Badi means created out of nothing. And the Bab is saying that this new thing that's happening is Badi', created out of nothing, and he is the one who's bringing it about through the will of God and the imams and so on. It's happening, and it is wondrously new. It is brand new compared to Haq, which is unimaginably ancient and always been there. But Badi' also participates in the Haqian ancientness of Haq, and so it is wondrously new because it is new and simultaneously ancient. So this is the idea, and this term, this word, has been taken up in the faith as sort of an emblem for the Baha'i ethos, right? We have the Kitab al-Badi' of Baha'u'llah. We have the Badi' calendar, right? We have the word, and the word is used by Baha'u'llah throughout his writings. It is kind of a symbol. It is, if we gave any credence at all to the notion of secularism, we would say in a secular context, this word Badi' could be thought of as modernity, as an avant-garde kind of modernity. The Bab is definitely saying that the times have changed. This is something brand new, something simultaneously ancient and sacred and old and destined from the beginning that has no beginning, and I'm the one who is doing it. He says this. He uses the first person, and he said, and not only that, there's a bit of a shift in his. In this text, this long text, even though it is revelation, divine revelation originating with God, theoretically, through the hidden imam. He has this passage in the beginning saying he received this from the hidden imam who told him to publish this book far and wide, which is actually the true Quran that had been in hiding with the hidden imam since the hidden imam disappeared. This is the meaning of the thing. Because in Shiism, you know, there's a distrust of the existing Quran. There's a strong sense that this has been edited by the enemies of the Shia and Ali's name taken out and all the rest of it. This is a big tradition and an important one in Shiism. The Bible is saying this is the true Quran. He knows that it's not that, but spiritually, if you like, metaphorically, poetically, Amthali, and this Amthali world, this imaginal world, is considered by the Bab and Sheikh Ahmad and Mullah Sadra and Sohravardi, all these people, as being the most real region in the cosmos. It's much realer than this nonsense we deal with on a daily basis here. The imaginal world is paradoxically the most real world. So this work that he's produced, that he's written, is more real than anything else, and it is the true Quran, the one that was put into hiding with the hidden imam that tells the truth about the history of Islam and all the rest of it. Okay, but this term Badi' becomes ingrained in Babi and then Baha'i consciousness. And it is a mystical value, a mystical quality that is enshrined. And even though this text purports to be a commentary on the Quran, and Quran commentary is, here's the verse. This verse is understood in these various hadith by various scholars in a number of ways, and they say this word means that, and that word means this, and this is what the Bab does in the first book on Surah of the Cow. He follows that procedure. In the final Lasma, it never happens. The Bab never says anything as vulgar as this means that. No. That ain't jazz. You know, he's not going to hit people over the head with the beauty of his exposition. He's going to allow the audience to create the meaning inside their hearts by getting the picture, by reading these Quranic words in this new arrangement. It's unbelievable. It really is unbelievable. And it's all as a result of these mystical experiences. We talked about the earlier one with Sayyid Kazem, the Holy Land rising up and sort of vibrating over to Shiraz and descending, and the Bab deciding to write an entire commentary on the Quran. The Bab began to write the Qayyim al-Asma, coincidentally, in presence of Mullah Hussein, but also after those 2 or 3 very dramatic visionary experiences that he had when he encountered the severed head of the Imam Hussein. You're familiar with these in the Dawn Breakers, right? And I mean, it doesn't really appeal to contemporary, shall we say, North American audience. You know, it's not touchy-feely mysticism in a sense. The Bab imbibed 7 drops of the blood from the Imam Hussein, and he says, after that experience, and I drank them with joy and ecstasy. After that experience, I found myself possessed of a new way of writing and expressing things, and composing verses and revealing lines. Something real happened in the life of the Bab. Because, as I said, if you compare that work with this work that I just read from, the Risala Suluk, and the Tafsir on Baqarah, which was written before, a few months earlier, completely different temperaments and perspectives and points of view. This is somebody who's in control of everything. And he also transforms our notion of what revelation is. Just like in the Quran, where they have these mysterious disconnected letters at the beginning of some of the surahs, you know, the Bab, to make the true Quran even more Quranic, puts disconnected letters in front of every surah, except for one. And some of them are disconnected letters that are familiar from the Quran, but some of them are new creations from him. And just in case anybody was in any doubt about where this text is coming from, the 108th and 109th surah of the Qayyim al-Asma have as disconnected letters the name Ali, Ain, Lam, Y, Ya, and the next one has the disconnected letters of the name Muhammad, M-H-M-D. And it spells Ali Muhammad. And who is Ali Muhammad? The Bab. And so he's giving his imza to this text. In case you didn't know. You know, this is for me, people. I did this at the age of 25. It's unbelievable. And it's, so that's mysticism, one type of mysticism in the writings of the Bab, but there are many other kinds of mysticism. Just read a couple of things here. Well, you know, Baha'u'llah calls it the first, greatest, and the mightiest of all books in the Kitab-i-Khan. And you'll notice also that Baha'u'llah does not say the first, the greatest, and the mightiest of all the Bab's books. Right? You know, now that the Atlas is published and translated and so forth, we have more liberty to go after the writings of the Bab and delve into them and mix it up and try to understand them and translate them. And I think the longer we wait, the more we're going to miss. So the main discursive narratological theme, to use a normal term, is the covenant, the renewal of the covenant. The number 42, the number of verses in the various chapters of the Qur'an. It's all standard. They're all 42 or 40.
Allah.
42 is the number of the word yea, verily, in the central verse in the Quran, when God brought forth out of the loins of Abraham the future seeds of all future humanity. In this place beyond time and beyond space, la zaman, la makan. And it's in Surah 7, verse 172, and there's no more important verse in the Quran. And he says to them, am I not your Lord? And they respond immediately, yes, indeed, we testify to this. And this yes, indeed, translates the Arabic word bala, which the numerical value is 42. So the Bab structures the entire Qalam al-Asma on this response of humanity, which in the long healing prayer, as you know, Baha'u'llah tells us that actually the children of Adam thought they were saying this word Bala, but I was actually saying it through them.
On our behalf.
Yeah, on our behalf. I, God, was saying Bala when they actually thought it was their tongue and their throat that was making the noise. It was me. So, but in any case, the Bab structures this to bring home the importance of the covenant, the renewal of the covenant with his revelation, and the insight that it later is made much of in Baha'i thought, that the day of the covenant is also the day of judgment. So you see in the Quran, the narrative of the Quran has two poles. One is time begins at the day of the covenant and ends on the day of the judgment. That's how the narrative goes in the Quran. It's not straightforward. You have to dig around and study it to come to this realization, but that's the way it is. Take it from me. In the Bab's work, again, with mushing together the subject of commentary and the meaning by never saying, by the way, this word means that and that word means this. He makes it happen musically. He makes it happen with the music of the Arabic and the poetry of the Arabic. You have no other choice but to come to the conclusion he wants you to come to. You may not agree with it, but you have to come to that conclusion. He also tells you, oh, and by the way, the day of the covenant is the same as the day of judgment, in case you were interested.
That's the one time when he did that.
And it's overwhelming. It's power, and you can see why the eggheads like Mullah Hussein and the other letters of the living, who were really super advanced, sort of young professors or senior graduate students, why they were just simply blown away, because the Bab came on like someone who was completely untrained, but had all of this ability and knowledge and power in his expression. So it's as that was part of his commentary on what it means to be a mystic, if you like. Right. So where are we?
We're good.
We're good. Okay,
Are those
Two days coexistent,
they're the same. Was it like two sides of the same coin?
so they are.
Yeah, yeah. But again, don't forget, folks, the Bab is not necessarily completely dogmatic about these things. In many of his writings, and in the writings of Baha'u'llah, and in the writings of Abdul Baha, there's a cardinal hermeneutic principle that things have multiple meanings. There's a tradition in Islam that each verse has a literal meaning, and then an esoteric meaning or an interior meaning, and then an interior meaning after that, and another one, up to 7. And sometimes that tradition is a quote from the Prophet Muhammad. And you know that in Islam, anytime you say the Prophet Muhammad, you also say, upon whom be God's blessing and peace. It's either said out loud, or it's thought in the brain, or felt in the heart. All right? This is given to the Prophet Muhammad, this hadith, and it was a formative hermeneutic principle in the early period and later and medieval period of Islam, because it allowed people to explore the meanings of the text at a very deep level. This is one of the enduring gifts of Islamic culture to religious studies, to the idea of reading and literature. It really put this on a very grand scale. So the Prophet said every verse has a literal meaning, and then an interior meaning, and then another meaning after, up to 7 levels. And then some of the hadiths say, or up to 70 levels. And some of them say up to 7,000 levels, and 70,000. And it goes on and on. Well, the Bab, weary of the math involved, I suppose, in at least one place that I know of, and probably more, says in the course of, I think it's the tafsir on the surah of the afternoon, sort of refers to that tradition about each verse having numerous levels. He says, oh, by the way, it's sort of a parenthesis. He says, yes, but you should also know that it's not only a verse has this many meanings. It says each letter of the revelation has a number of meanings that are beyond infinity. It's a bit like the overtones of a musical note. They just go on into the universe for forever. You know, I mean, people who study sound know this. I don't know it. I heard about it. You know, but it's very much like the semantic content of a linguistic phenomenon.
Even the Hamza.
Meaning goes on everything. Meaning goes on, and it's up to us. It's part of the adventure of being alive is to be with meaning, to be intimate with meaning. And we may not see things, and the understanding is that, well, this is all preparation for the next world, you know, the next life, the life after death, right? In the case in which death does not really exist. But these contemplations of meaning and the spiritual realities have something to do with the development of the soul, the formation of the soul, right? Which is the reality of the human being. So this is where we are now, is a womb. This is really a womb out of which we will be born. You can think of it as a womb with a view, but don't quote me.
Dr. Lawson.
A few other items about the Qiyam al-Asma. Yeah. Oh,
It's not a question, I just know you were worried about time, and I would just love you to get back to suffering. So I'm just gonna put
okay.
in my little.
It's never very far away somehow.
I just wanna like plant that little seed.
Thank you.
Okay.
It might have to wait till tomorrow, but what time is it, by the way?
You have 25 minutes.
Oh, okay, we can suffer.
Money always have to say.
I'd just like to finish this
Yes,
sort of,
yes.
this list of things that are four in the Qiyam al-Asma, the fournesses that happen. There are four, the covenant is built on the 4 pillars of the throne of God, which are those 4 things that the Bab said that were the face of God. Remember, the Tawheed and Nubuwah and Walaya and so on. Those 4 things. And that the throne, which is understood in many different ways. In the writings, you know, the throne of God is the heart of the sincere servant, right? We've encountered this many times. The throne of God is where the soul or the imagination of the sincere servant resides. That is God's throne. The throne of God, throne is on the water. Joseph, in the story of Joseph, very strangely sits upon an arsh, which in the rest of the Quran is only God is allowed to sit on this arsh, which is the Arabic word for throne. But in the story of Joseph, his parents come down from Canaan land and bow down to him while he's on the throne. Right? So Ali's name is written on the throne. The throne of God, therefore, is somehow construed as consciousness as such. So, in addition, there are throughout the Qayyum al-Asma 4 voices at play and intermingle and sort of harmonize the voice of God and the voice of the hidden Imam and the voice of Sayyid Ali Muhammad and the voice of the Bab. So these 4 voices are threading through the text all the time, and sometimes you can't really discern who is who. All right, I think ultimately what happens in the case of the story of Joseph is that Joseph and Jacob are reunited. Do you remember in that prayer of Baha'u'llah when he says, I make my complaint and grief only to God? When the prayer for the Muslims that I read earlier, does anybody have a copy of that yet? They've disappeared.
Yeah.
They went like hotcakes. Thank you. Baha'u'llah says, He is God, exalted be He, the Lord of majesty and power. Then he says, I plead my grief and sorrow unto God. That's a direct quotation from the Surah of Joseph. Jacob, who is heartbroken at the loss of Joseph, and Benjamin, his younger brother, weeps so violently that he washes the faculty of sight out of his eyes. His eyes turn white with grief. The color he represents the faculty of sight. And he says, but yet I make my grief, exactly these words, only to God. So Baha'u'llah is reiterating the story of Joseph. And then you know, Joseph inhabits Baha'u'llah's writings quite a bit. So this is leading us to your favorite topic.
Yeah.
Okay. And I think we better go there now. I want to give,
Not favorite, just
this is
need to know.
for you, Mike, later, okay? Don't let me forget. Sorry?
I was gonna say, I wouldn't say it was my favorite, but it's the one I'm very curious about.
Well,
because of your writings.
There's a big mystery involved with it. I can't
Yeah.
read these.
Hey, Todd?
Yeah.
Could I share a point that you brought out in a webinar, and I pulled my Lights of Guidance, a new edition.
Okay.
And Shoghi, a letter written on behalf of Shoghi Effendi, he states point blank, he said that Joseph is a manifestation of God. Letter signed by
Oh, thank
Shoghi
you.
Effendi.
Thank you very much. We had a little blow-by from some of the friends who, hey, you can't call Joseph a manifestation of God. Thank you. Send me that, would you?
I'll bring it tomorrow.
It could
I'll
come
bring
in
the
handy.
book and we
Okay,
can
thank
read
you.
it together.
Thank you. Yeah. There's, okay, so what we'll do now then is look if I can find my stuff here. This could be it. Well, I guess what we'll do now is, I wanted to talk about Islam, and we're only going to have one more session, right? For me to do this, to catch up. So, I'm going to read you a couple of passages from the Quran just to drive home the idea that there's a great deal of very deep resonance between the Baha'i teachings and the Quran and Islam.
And there's 102 verses from the Quran that Shoghi Effendi
That's right, thank you. Yeah, so this is 14:14. Never have we sent forth any apostle otherwise than with a message in his own people's language, so that they might make the truth clear unto them. but God lets go astray whom he will. This is a super important Quranic principle, and I wanted to share it with you because, in a sense, Baha'u'llah and the Bab are obeying this Quranic principle when they speak in terms of Quranic commentary, in terms of mystical terminology. This is not something that they foisted off on the people. The people loved this language. This was part of their language. It's not necessarily a linguistic language, it's a cultural language. So Baha'u'llah and the Bab both were speaking the language that the people already understood. All right? So are then they who are bent on denying the truth not aware that the heavens and the earth were once a single entity, which we then divided? So unity is primordial, ontological, from the very beginning. Right? And among his wonders is the creation of the heavens and the earth, and the diversity of your tongues and colors. For in this there are messages and revelations for all who are possessed of knowledge. So this is the diversity of creation. This is in the early 7th century AD in the Arabian desert. This man is having this vision and sharing this vision with his followers and his audience. All right. Now every community has had an apostle, and only after their apostle has appeared is judgment passed on them in all equity. Okay? But I got him transposed a little bit. Among his wonders is the creation of the heavens and the earth, and the diversity of your tongues and colors, languages and races, if you like to use such an outmoded word. For in this, behold, there are revelations for all who are possessed of knowledge. Now, in the context of this diversity, and had thy Lord willed, he surely could have made mankind one single community, right? No problem. But they are all in different communities. And then why did he not make them all one community? The answer comes in Quran 49:13. O mankind, behold, we have created you all out of male and female, and have made you into various nations and tribes and colors and languages, so that you might, for one reason, so that you might come to recognize each other. That's the reason for difference. So that, and this word that's used here in the Arabic, ta'arufu, is a word of mutuality. So it means so that you might share the experience of getting to know each other. This is why God has created variation and difference amongst the human beings. All right? So these are things that are very important in and there are many, many more, but you can see how the audience who had these things in their hearts would be responding to the message of Baha'u'llah. Here's something from the Guardian. As to Muhammad, the apostle of God, let none among his followers who read these pages think for a moment that either Islam or its prophet or his book or his appointed successors or any of his authentic teachings have been or are to be in any way or to however slight a degree disparaged. That's from the Guardian. That's not on behalf of the Guardian. That's not something that somebody forgot to put in the mail that was written by somebody who worked in the office. This is from the Guardian, right? Nothing about Muhammad or the Quran or the appointed successors, the imams, he means, is to be criticized or disparaged. Ever. All right? So if you see things that appear to be problems with people calling themselves Muslim that are not obeying the laws of the Quran or seem to be causing trouble and so on and so forth, remember, they're calling themselves Muslims. All right? They're calling themselves Muslims. And we don't have any control over that.
Yeah.
But what the prophet said, who the prophet was, what the Quran says, we consider holy. It's part of our religion. Right? The lineage of the Bab, the descendant of the Imam Hussein, the diverse and striking evidences in Nabil's narrative of the attitude of the herald of our faith, the Bab, towards the founders, the Imams, and the Book of Islam, the glowing tributes paid by Baha'u'llah in the Kitab-i-Iqan to Muhammad and his lawful successors, and in particular to the peerless and incomparable Imam Hussein, the arguments adduced forcibly, fearlessly, and publicly by Abdul Baha in churches and synagogues to demonstrate the validity of the message of the Arabian prophet, and last but not least, the written testimony of the Queen of Romania, who, born in the Anglican faith, and notwithstanding the close alliance of her government with the Greek Orthodox Church, the state religion of her adopted country, has largely, as a result of the perusal of these discourses of Abdul Baha, been prompted to proclaim her recognition of the prophetic function of Muhammad. God is all, everything. He is the power behind all beginnings. His is the voice within us that shows us good and evil. All this proclaims, as the Guardian says in no uncertain terms, the true attitude of the Baha'i faith towards its parent religion. Now remember that the story of Joseph and the Bab's commentary has as its final magnificent ending the reunion of Jacob with his son Joseph. This can be understood as, in fact, a metaphor for the relationship between the Baha'i faith and Islam. Baha'i faith and the role of Joseph, and Islam as the father of Joseph, who are, through worldly circumstances and preoccupations and concerns, separated, but who are destined to embrace again in this loving reunion. It's not impossible, right? What greater proof it may be pertinently asked, can the divines of either Persia or Turkey require, wherewith to demonstrate the recognition by the followers of Baha'u'llah of the exalted position occupied by the Prophet Muhammad among the entire company of the messengers of God? What greater service do these divines expect us to render the cause of Islam? What greater evidence of our competence can they demand that we should kindle in quarters so far beyond their reach the spark of an ardent and sincere conversion to the truth voiced by the Apostle of God, and obtained from the pen of royalty this public and indeed historic confession, the one I read a second ago. Okay, well, I wasn't going to leave California without sharing those verses and those things with you, because I think we all really are thirsty to hear about our relationship to Islam. And while the Baha'i faith is not Islam as such, it's not copyright, capital letter Islam, there is a deep and abiding relationship between the two communities and if you like, thought worlds and faiths. Okay.
Could it be said that the Baha'i faith is the New Testament? I mean, in an allegorical sense?
Yes. Okay, so we're going to now go to a few of the, we have 2 minutes, I suppose.
You have 10 minutes.
No kidding. All right, so we can do this.
Just give me something to chew on.
Well, so what I'm going to do now is share with you a number of I was going to read a number of Quranic verses that are super important for the understanding of the way in which divine signs work, which I consider to be the core of the mystical vocation, if you like, in Islam and in the Baha'i faith, the idea of the divine signs. And I think probably we need to have a weekend or a month or something on this topic of signs, divine signs. Yeah, so we're not going to go there today, or now we're going to now look at some of these traditions or hadith that are beloved in the Baha'i faith, in the writings of Baha'u'llah, in the writings of the Bab, in the writings of Abdu'l-Baha, and that they're everywhere. Sometimes they're not even indicated. Sometimes they forget to mention, this is a hadith, so we think that Baha'u'llah said it or somebody else said it. In fact, he's quoting. He's quoting these things, just as he quotes the Quran. The Quran is the most widely translated book of Quran commentary in the world. You know that, right? It's been, Chris Buck said this is a very powerful way of characterizing it. Chris wrote a beautiful book on the Quran, on the Kitab-i-Khan. The Quran is really to explain, the Kitab-i-Khan is really to explain the Quran. And in the process of explaining the Quran, along the lines of the traditions or hadith are brought in to help get the meaning out.
Is that symbol in secret?
Yeah. So the most important one that we've talked about earlier is the hadith of the hidden treasure. And it goes like this. I was a hidden treasure. God is speaking. I was a hidden treasure and desired to be known. Therefore, I created humanity or creation, and that I might be known and was known. So this is every serious thinker in Islam recites this, thinks about it, writes commentaries on it. It's a key verse. It's as important as the doctrine of Tawheed in Islam. The idea in this hadith. And as I said, Abdu'l-Baha at the age of 16 wrote a 50-page commentary on this highly sophisticated philosophical terminology. It's unbelievable. And it's online. You've found it, translated by Mujan Momin, fully annotated as well. So some of these things that would otherwise be difficult technical terms are frequently explained. So the next one that we encounter is, there was God and there was nothing else. You're familiar with encountering this in the Kitab-i-Khan. God was and nothing was with him. This is the hadith. And then the other half of that hadith is, nothing has changed. God was, nothing was with him. It is now as it was. And Baha'u'llah loves this. The only thing that exists is this God that we do not know. So this is a very important hadith. Another one is the hadith of extra effort in fulfilling the law of God, called nawafil, the supererogatory acts, in things above the daily minimum requirements of being a Muslim, praying and fasting and so on. And this is a very important hadith which Baha'u'llah refers to many times. God said, I will declare a war against him who shows hostility to a pious worshiper of mine. And the most beloved things with which my slave comes nearer to me is what I have enjoined upon him. And my servant keeps on drawing near to me through performing extra acts of devotion until I love him. And when I love him, I become the hearing with which he hears, and I become the sight with which he sees, and I become the hand with which he takes or grips, and I become the legs with which he walks. So this rings a bell, right? You've encountered these statements in the writings. Then here's the one that is probably more familiar. Also in your own selves will you not behold the signs. The self is characterized as he who knows himself knows his Lord. You've encountered this. This is a very important one. Man arafa nafsahu faqad arafa rabbahu. Who knows himself knows his Lord. There are several levels of understanding this in the writings, and we don't have time to go into them all. But these are things that enrich the Baha'i writings, and they come straight from the Islamic tradition. And if you took out all the references to the Quran and to the Hadith and the Kitab-i-Khan, it would be a much thinner volume. Okay? This is, wallahi, this is the truth. You know, this is just the way it is. Baha'u'llah was, in a sense, rewriting the Islamic scripture. Okay, now we must get to suffering, if you're not suffering already. Okay. All right, so thank you. And this is familiar to readers of the Quran and other things. It is called the Hadith of bewilderment, or our knowledge, or sometimes it says our cause. They're variants. Variants don't really bother this tradition that much. They're happy to read variants, and so it's okay. It's not an either or situation, it's all together. We read them all together. Okay? Our knowledge is bewilderingly abstruse. None understands it. Oh dear. Well, what it says is none understands it save the sent messenger, like the messengers of God, the angels who have been brought near to the throne, muqarrabin, or the believer whose heart has been tested for the love of God. And this word tested, imtahana, is a technical term in leather preparation. It means whose heart has been battered so much that it becomes porous and soft, so that the divine knowledge
can sink
These words are killer, people. They're absolutely, they go right to the soul. So these are the three people who understand our words. This is where love and knowledge coalesce. Our knowledge is sa'ab mustasad. Sa'ab mustasad. Our knowledge is bewilderingly abstruse. It's quoted in the Quran 2 or 3 times. None understands it save the messengers of God, the angels who have, not just any angel, the angels who've been brought near to the divine throne. The divine throne, remember, is the consciousness and the heart. And the believer whose heart has been softened through the stresses of following the truth, so that the leather of the heart has become porous to receive knowledge, because the heart is the seat of knowledge in the Quran. The brain doesn't exist in the Quran, please. The brain, what a vulgar idea. The center of cognition and feeling and insight is the heart in Islam. Dear friends, thank you for your kind attention. What a mess.
Friends, why don't we take 15 minutes and then we'll continue. Mr. Dunbar, do we need to set up again?